Yesterday, Mr. Agnelli, you said in a speech that there could no longer be any doubt that Italy's system is on the edge of collapse. What is going to happen to you if Italy does collapse?
Well, this is a very difficult question to answer. When you say collapse, you think, what would happen to me if Italy is taken over by the communists? If Italy becomes like a country of the Eastern Europe? I mean, if whatever we call of Euro-communism means that even Italy is going to be an Euro country like all the Eastern European countries are, I don't think I would like to live in Italy under those circumstances. But I would try to fight as much as I can for those circumstances not to happen.
L'Italia è in notevole difficoltà. La misura della vitalità del nostro Paese deriva dalla nostra capacità di camminare con gli altri paesi della comunità economica europea che fanno parte del convoglio del plotone con cui vogliamo vivere. La velocità di un convoglio è sempre paragonabile alla nave più lenta del convoglio. Poi viene un momento in cui la nave più lenta diventa troppo lenta, allora la si abbandona e a quel momento va alla deriva.
I always said it was dangerous to think anything in his presence because he'd pick it up. He had an unusual ability to understand the vibrations of events.
If you are not an Italian, to understand what Gianni Agnelli was for Italy, you must go back to the early 50s. After the war, Italy was nearly destroyed. No bridges, no factories, huge unemployment. People was really in poor shape. Dying young because of no medical care. Then something happened abruptly. It was the so-called miracolo economico, the economical miracle.
Suddenly there was an economic boom and lots of industries and companies sprang up and there was a real energy to rebuild.
Italy became one of the largest industrialized countries in the world.
The industrial comeback of Italy is Fiat, and it changed Italy completely.
In the 50s, a lot of people came to northern Italy. The factories were growing like mushrooms, by the thousands, really by the thousands. So the people, they got cash salary, pension, medical care, and the Fiat medical care was very good, school for the children.
Fiat housing, Fiat holiday camps, Fiat kindergartens, Fiat sports fields.
And finally, they got a car.
He had put the whole of Italy on four wheels.
So all this was embodied in the mind of the Italian with the Agnelli family and particularly with Gianni.
L'automobile è diventato il simbolo della libertà dell'uomo nel movimento.
He was involved with everything Italians love. Sex, cars, and sports.
He had soccer with Juventus. He had Ferrari with cars.
You couldn't really miss Gianni Agnelli. People would think that they invented him.
Every woman was in love with him. Every man wanted to be him.
He had been a playboy when he was young, but no decent Italian is going to be dismayed by that. He was a man of ideas.
He became, for many Italians, the symbol of what Italy could do. The symbol of the Italian Renaissance.
Gianni's grandfather was Senatore Agnelli, who was the founder of Fiat. Quite early on, he understood that mass production was the future of the car industry. And he was greatly inspired by American car companies.
Nel 1906 scopre che in America c'è un certo Henry Ford a Detroit. Da quel momento si mette in testa di fare come Ford, delle vetture di serie.
He was a very cunning man, quite ruthless. The Italian robber baron.
Fiat grew and expanded into trucking, airplanes, trains.
It became the pillar of Italian industry. Gianni was raised in Torino. He had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. Mrs. Constance Parker was the English nanny.
We always had to walk with Miss Parker in Turin, side by side. She took us walking every day for 1 hour at least. Cold, snow, wind.
You have to behave especially well because you're an Agnelli. But Gianni was very naughty as a child, full of mischief.
He was making all my toys, that sort of thing. I didn't like it so much. You know, he liked to tease. He was a great joker, all his life. He teased all us. We had long hair. He pulled it every time he passed next to us. But he was very nice apart from that.
She was very charming and very attractive.
Girls. Cars and girls. That was definitely for him.
His mother, Virginia Bourbon del Monte, was extravagant, eccentric. She had a leopard as a pet. It was, I would say, a crazier part of the family.
She was quite promiscuous. For a woman at her time, that was very unusual. It scandalized European society. Gianni's father, Edoardo, was very interested in the arts. He loved the theater, he loved literature. He was in his early 40s, and he had flown to Forte dei Marmi on a seaplane.
He had just taken off his seatbelt.
It hit a log and capsized, and Edoardo was decapitated by the propeller of the plane. The Senatore had to go to the morgue and identify his son. He was devastated. He left 7 children behind and a very young wife.
Gianni was the eldest and he had to cope with it.
He had to build himself an armor.
His grandfather sort of adopted him and was the most important figure in his life.
He trained Gianni to run Fiat and put the structure in place to hand the company over to Gianni as the sole heir.
Gianni went to America for the first time in 1938.
He was shocked at how modern the U.S. was and how far behind Italy was.
The Ford plant in Detroit is a village unto itself, with its big blast furnaces and smokestacks. At the time, America was undisputably the #1 in the world in terms of industry, military might, in all respects, and it made a very big impression.
He thought that New York was the coolest town in the world. He loved America. I mean, he told me, I'm pro-America down to my belt.
Gianni went into war. He felt this was a duty. He had to be loyal to the king and loyal to the idea of the Italian state. But there was a feeling that this was a mistake.
My grandfather tried to stop him, but Gianni said, no, there is war and I prefer going against the Russians. He was a cavalry officer, which was quite brilliant.
He rationalized Agnelli should be brave at war, and he was a brave man. He said it was a very sad experience. A lot of my soldiers that I fought with died. I really don't want to remember this. He didn't have a war sitting in some salon, being elegant in a good uniform. I mean, he had a war.
But now the people of Naples, seeing the British and American forces coming in, well, they pretty well went mad.
Christmas 1945. Well, that was a very sad Christmas. And we were all staying in Turin in this house. The house was half bombed. And my mother died in a car accident. We were all very, very distressed.
At the end of the war, Gianni's grandfather was accused of being a collaborator. That was very insulting and also untrue.
My grandfather was still alive, and I must say he was treated very badly by the new anti-fascist Comitato di Liberazione Nazionale. They decided my grandfather, he had to go away from Fiat. It was a great sadness for him.
The grandfather couldn't work in his company after the war, and he died of sorrow because of that.
He used to go with his car and go there and look and said, why don't they want me? Why don't they want me? Because he had given all his life to Fiat.
Before the Senatore died, he was actually exonerated of being a collaborator with the fascists. But by then he was a broken man. He died without ever returning to the factory.
my grandfather's funeral, we tried to see if we could stop in front of Fiat Works. And they said no.
For this man, who had played such a big role in Italian capitalism, that his funeral would be ignored by most people, that was very painful. Certainly for Gianni, who felt very responsible for his name and his reputation.
The grandfather had died in disgrace. The factory had been bombed. And Gianni does describe his concern at seeing the sea of red flags at public demonstrations. He was a very worried man.
In quel momento sembra che sia caduta del tutto la stella della Fiat, no? Che insomma dall'altare alla polvere.
The Allies were going to confiscate Fiat. But the Americans were quite worried about the increasing communist influence in Europe. And Gianni made the case that Fiat could help with that. Through his charm and his very good English, Gianni played a big role in saving Fiat.
He was able to say it with the Americans. Fiat is Italian, is Turinese. We want to keep it there.
Si vedeva sopra i tetti e sopra un po' di nebbia torinese questo logo con scritto Fiat. E lui disse: guardi, F vuol dire fabbrica, siamo ancora una fabbrica, produciamo le cose. I italiana, non ho venduto. A automobili, sono sempre il core business. E soprattutto l'ultima lettera, credo quella a cui lui era più legato, Torino, e lui disse: siamo sempre qui.
After the war had ended and it was clear that the Agnellis would retain control over Fiat, there was a moment, so who is actually going to run it? Vittorio Valletta was one of these people who really lived for the company. Gianni was very wise in recognizing that Valletta should be chairman of Fiat. Valletta saw Gianni as the prince whom you serve, but he rightly knew that at that stage Gianni could not have run Fiat.
He had a certain group of friends that had fought in the war, that felt despair, that felt the only thing was left for them in life was to amuse themselves, go with women, drinking, have cars and all of that. And the beginning of after the war attitude of Gianni was that.
Valletta told Gianni, have a good time for a little while. Then when the moment will arrive, I'll give the Fiat to you. Gianni did have a good time, that I must say.
The south of France was abuzz with Gianni's arrival.
The south of France was extremely carefree. Very loose, if that makes any sense.
You had everybody from Somerset Maugham to Elsa Maxwell and Rainier and Grace. Harry Onassis on his yacht. It was a great big private house party.
When I met Gianni the first time, I was very young. I was on the tennis circuit, but I wasn't doing very well, and I went to the south of France to take a break, and I was awed by Gianni's charisma and all his charm. The easy manner, the friendliness, instead of being stuck up or something like that.
I was in Europe modeling for Chanel. I met Gianni through Onassis. He was on cocaine, stoned, and I didn't even know it. And he was just coming on to me like crazy. And he was very handsome. And so we went off to his house, and that's where we hung out that night.
Gianni was irresistible. It was not possible not to be seduced by him. Not possible.
Johnny was in full fling, surrounding himself with starlets.
There are three things I like most. Love, love, and love.
Anita Ekberg was fun, crazy. She was crazy about Gianni.
Avvocato, lei qua, ma che meraviglia.
I was out with this interior decorator. He said, let's go to Johnny Agnelli's at the Grand. I know he's with Anita Ekberg. I said, oh, wonderful. So we go to the hotel, and Johnny never locked the door. The light is very low, and the music is playing, and there's Johnny in bed with Anita Ekberg. And so we start laughing, we put the lights on, and she started chasing us down the hall, stark naked, with these huge bosoms. The next morning, Johnny called me and said, oh, I thought it was wonderful.
You always said that ladies should be treated like tarts, and tarts should be treated like ladies.
Would contemporary women find him horrifying?
Oh, I don't think so.
No?
Well, the people, what's wrong is there's nobody around like him anymore. That's the great problem, because they're so involved with making money, they're boring as hell. So what do they bring to the table? I mean, Johnny was funny and exciting. He was incredibly alive, you see. But I wasn't looking to have a romance with Johnny Agnelli. I thought he was insane.
One of Johnny's favorite things was to jump out of a helicopter into the Mediterranean Sea. That's like how he would start his weekend.
When I was a little kid, I remember him, he arrived at this hotel, Hotel du Cap, and he had this helicopter, and he jumped out of the helicopter, and then he swam ashore.
He had a physical courage that was on the verge of being, suicidal.
Johnny loved to do the Cresta run. You're on a toboggan going down a chute at like 100 miles an hour.
You know, I said to him one day, why don't you just go to the, the Empire State Building and jump off?
He valued courage in the abstract. He practiced it every day when he drove his car, which was a hair-raising experience.
There are many ways of dying. I don't think an accident is the worst. There are infinitely duller and more unpleasant ways.
I drive many times with him. Terrible experience. Terrible experience. He drove always like we would be in a Formula One race, despite we were in Torino.
He was completely crazy.
Totally disregarded policemen, one-way streets.
He would pass all the red lights, and he would not look around. When you see those things in films, you think they're not true, but with Gianni, they were. That's the way it was.
Io credevo di morire.
And I said, listen, you son of a bitch, if you want to, to die in the mountains and to do things like that, you don't have to make other people, so I'm not talking to you for the next 24 hours.
He had a wonderful new Ferrari, metallizzata, verde, bellissima, una cosa da perdere il fiato. Ci vieni? Allora non ho resistito, ho detto sì. Stupid, I always try not to. Ho attraversato Nizza a una velocità che secondo me era pazzesca. Siamo stati naturalmente fermati a metà strada e io ho detto meno male, grazie a Dio. E sono arrivati dei carabinieri che hanno detto, avvocato, ma le pare che lei deve venire per le nostre strade con sta Ferrari? Dice, come vuoi che non la fermiamo? Dice, a parte dice che la vogliamo vedere. Gianni non ha acquisito una tale allure, uno tale charme, allora lui cortesemente si è alzato e gli ha fatto vedere anche l'interno, che era tutto di cuoio rosso.
People that were around him, they were all in awe of him. The avocado, I mean, it was insane, absolute madness.
And here comes the bride, the Honourable Pamela Digby, age 19. The bridegroom, Mr. Randolph Churchill, is with his regiment. So it's swords and smiles, and the bride is having quite a lot of trouble with that feather.
At the end of World War II, Pamela Churchill filed divorce from Randolph Churchill, the son of the Prime Minister. He was a terrible drunk and disliked by many people. So she needed to make some new conquests. She went to a big ball that was being thrown by Ali Khan, one of the great playboys of the Western world. Pamela and he struck up this affair, but there was a moment when he spotted Rita Hayworth and fell head over heels in love with her. He had been trying to figure out how to extricate himself from Pamela, and he came up with an ingenious solution.
Ali Khan wanted to get rid of her. And he found that Johnny was a very good creation.
Ali Khan's good friend, Johnny Agnelli, fellow playboy, came by boat, caught sight of Pamela, and said, buongiorno. He was going off on a sail. He invited her out for a day, and she just stayed.
It was a smart political move on his side. Don't forget, it was after the World War, and Italy had been on the Axis side.
Using her name Churchill helped tremendously.
They were using each other. He was learning how to be a political operator. Pamela understood that.
She became a bit of a Pygmalion for Gianni. She wanted him to advance so that she could become the unofficial queen of Italy.
The Churchill alliance was very valuable. He was able to make Washington connections, cleanse the reputation of Fiat. And that was the most important thing that she did. He responded with incredible generosity. He bought Pamela a flat in the most beautiful neighborhood of Paris. He gave her a butler and a Bentley and a chauffeur, and he opened up accounts at all the best couturiers. She converted to Catholicism because she figured that was absolutely necessary to getting Johnny to marry her. It didn't work.
He used to go to sort of loose houses, as he called them, and try to pick somebody up.
Pamela was away. Johnny spotted this really gorgeous woman named Anne-Marie d'Estanville. They hooked up that night, and they were embracing on the terrace. And who should suddenly appear but Pamela? She flew into a rage. She threw something at them.
With her screaming and calling Anne-Marie, who's certainly a very pretty, innocent young girl, hooker and all that,
they decided they would get out of there very, very quickly. So they jumped into Johnny's car. Johnny was kind of in a state of agitation. Something was off about him.
He had taken drugs.
He was coked out of his head. I mean, he was really stoned constantly.
He did a lot when he was young. He used to refer to the great white knights, Le Grand Nuit Blanche.
He was going very fast and slammed into a butcher's truck.
It was a very, very bad crash. The young girl had nothing at all, walked away, but Johnny went into hospital.
Johnny had 7 fractures in one of his legs.
It was swollen so much, it was gangrene. For 2 months he had to lie, leg upside down, covered with antibiotics. I must say, I never heard him complain.
Pamela rushed to his bedside. His 4 sisters would have none of it.
Siccome lei era divorziata, naturalmente le sorelle erano contrarissime a lei, hanno fatto la guerra contro di lei.
I didn't like her very much. I think she was too bossy for my taste.
Did you and your sisters feel protective of Johnny?
Protective, quite not, but how should I say? Concerned. Very concerned.
The sisters took matters in their own hands. Two of the sisters, Christiana and Maria Sole, had a very good friend, Princess Mirella Caracciolo.
Mirella came from the Caracciolo family, which were Neapolitan aristocrats, almost royal family.
I had a house in Trastevere, and it was just behind Marella's house. And so at that time, I was very lucky because I had a car, and I could drive. And so every time we went out, I took Marella with me. All my friends wanted to marry her. And Johnny used to always say that that's a lovely girl.
She met Johnny right after the war and had fallen completely in love with him. When the sisters called, she immediately went to Florence to visit him in the hospital.
She was always with us, and she always saw Johnny, was always looking for Johnny, thinking about Johnny for 5 years, and after she got him.
My mother felt he was too much free-thinking to be a good husband. She didn't like him at all. She said, that awful boy. His reputation was very much glamorous, no?
He's what you call Don Giovanni, absolutely. But even if he says only maids get in love, Johnny was very in love with Marella at that moment.
Marella spent the first few months lying on a sofa, drinking orange juice and reading books on French poetry. Johnny got more and more worried about this, having this sloppy wife. And so he called Countess Lili Volpi in Venice. She had Palazzo Volpi, and she hosted the best parties, the best dinners. And he sent Marella there for an intensive course of how to manage a home. She spent terrifying days with this old witch. Then I guess she understood that she had a job to do as well as being in love and having a husband.
During their early years, they lived in Turin. They had 2 kids.
Johnny named his son Eduardo after his father.
He was so happy about this birth of this boy. He came to see my daughter, and he said, she's the same age of Eduardo, comparing, which is something I never thought I'd see Johnny do.
Johnny had bought La Leopolda. It was a grand house. It's just sort of one drawing room after another.
It was used for the red shoes. It was huge, and it was unleveled.
Marella and Johnny entertained almost everybody, kings, heads of state.
They were considered the top class of the couple around the world.
To be invited to Johnny's house was always, everyone wanted to be invited, and Marella made quite a decor about the house.
You have no idea in that moment, American, when they want to be up to date, they were imitating the look, everything of the Agnelli's house.
Johnny had a great eye, really obsessed by aesthetics.
From the beginning, he got this unbelievable connaissance of painting.
He loved Balthus, long before Balthus was admired by the public.
The very first things he bought from me were 2 early hand-painted Warhols, one with a Batman on it in full color. It was something which attracted him very much. He kept it always very dearly and always had it with him in one of his bedrooms somewhere.
What's the garçonnière?
The garçonnière is a place where guys go, which they keep to meet their mistresses.
The garçonnière was a way of being private and of not having, scandal.
And did Johnny have a couple?
He had them all over the place.
The Villa Bona is a 1-bedroom Italo-Japanese bachelor retreat studded with sculpture by Lynn Chadwick and Henry Moore that most cities would envy.
I come here for lunch sometimes with some people, and I give some rendezvous here to people that either don't want to come to the office or don't want to go through official channels.
I noticed it's loaded with pop art.
This is a joke. I mean, I think it's a Marilyn Monroe smile on mouth, but I think it makes one feel rather in a gay mood to have it around. If I'm nervous or keyed up or excited or, any of these sort of emotional conditions one can be in, if you have a chance of looking at something beautiful, is always extremely calming and extremely balancing.
Fondo era aristotelico e il bello e il buono facevano parte dello stesso pacchetto.
The Agnellis were seen as paragons of style. The way they dressed was the epitome of the epitome.
Marella used to come to the fashion house to get some clothes from Valentino. She was extremely simple. But she had this size extraordinary, this long neck, beautiful legs, and everything was fantastic.
Style was Gianni's life. Style was everything. The way he dressed was very recognizable, it was very good taste. He cared about that a lot.
Gianni always used to wear his tie like this. How can a man who wears his tie like that be the best dressed man in Italy? Well, he was the best dressed man in Italy.
Was he vain?
L'ha inventato, la vanità, l'ha inventata. Lui adorava di essere Gianni Agnelli. Adorava che tutti lo adorassero.
Everybody tried to copy him, to put the watch on top of the cuff of the shirt. A little detail.
I was in my 20s, he just done this, I saw it, I thought, what a good idea.
Did you ever see other people copying him?
Everybody. Who didn't copy him?
I did copy myself.
One big part of the Agnelli style and Agnelli aesthetic is it's never supposed to look like you're trying to have style. It's like the dinner party just happened, and you just happened to wake up and grab something from your closet and look totally fabulous. It always was about ease and grace and never trying too hard.
Here you had a man, he had a leg that was practically destroyed. He used to ski in a brace with great elegance and go down faster than anybody else.
And that grace was something that he and Morello both had, and that was something that other people around them kind of emulated.
How did the Agnellis differ from an aristocratic English family?
Well, they were certainly a lot more friendly. The Duke, when he came down and he passed us, we all had to just put our backs to the wall and look at the floor. Whereas as Mr. and Mrs. Agnelli, you became part of the family. When I left my wife, and I came out of the cupboard, the first person I told was Mr. Agnelli. I told him right away because I wanted him to know, and because I was living in his house, I was part of the household. He had a right to know.
What did you tell him exactly?
That I got myself a boyfriend, and he didn't, Not really very interested at all. Made on he wasn't very interested. Actually, the first thing he did, he went around the corner, got on the telephone and rang the Duke of Beaufort and said, "Stuart's queer." He rang everybody because he loved gossip. He loved it.
Johnny had this habit with everyone to wake them at about 4 or 5 in the morning, say, "Is it amusing in London, or is it amusing wherever you are?" And this poor person, you know, was in deep sleep.
This is because of Johnny. In all the phones I have a do not disturb button, okay? This is because of him. Because he would call me at 6 o'clock in the morning, wherever I was. I said, "Oh, did I wake you up?" I said, "No."
When he had said what he needed to say, he just hung up, so you were sitting there waiting. When will the hang-up come?
I have this house in the south of France. And he would call me and he says, "How is the sea?" I said, "Johnny, I have no idea how the sea." I'm tired. Go look. So I go and look at my window. And I said, "The sea is beautiful." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." He said, "My captain told me the sea is terrible." He always lies to me, okay? And then I'm sleeping, and the door knocks. And I said, "Was it Johnny?" I said, so he had landed on my place with a helicopter at 6 o'clock in the morning. He said, "Okay, let's go sailing."
The Agnelli was a magnificent boat. It was mahogany.
E avevo una troupe di marinai e mi portarono fino a Capri una volta, dove lui mi raggiungeva. È stato molto bello lì, perché io ero praticamente sola sulla Agnetta.
Io ho detto, io sono di montagna, di avvocato, io non sono di mare. Io non vengo, perché io soffro di mal di mare. E lui mi ha detto, no, devi diventare un vecchio marinaio, mi ha detto, un lupo di mare.
Any weather, you had to go in this boat. And the boat was like that, and he was happy like that.
Sempre nudo. Sempre nudo. Era bravissimo.
He had this enormous appetite for life.
When he was around, the face of life changed. Everything. Electricity.
Come gli veniva in mente una cosa, gliela facciamo subito adesso, via.
Go in Rome for lunch, and then in Paris, and then he would fly back to Turin, and in the morning he would go to Germany. I mean, move all the time, driving fast, moving fast.
When you got to the end of the day, your mind was a blank because you took in Rome, Venice, Paris, and come back again.
Giulietto dice, adesso se andiamo a fare una sciata, andiamo con l'elicottero, andiamo sul Cervinia e facciamo un po' di discese e poi si ritorna a Torino.
The worst thing was stepping back into your own life. That was the worst, because you were with this guy who was James Bondish. Then when you step back into your life, it was such a huge letdown.
Un presidente della Repubblica doveva venire a mangiare a Roma, qui, anche a via 24 maggio. E allora mi chiama, mi dice, Giulio, facciamo un menù, dice, diamo i coglioni di toro. E gli faccio io, dico, ma scusa avvocato, dico, ma a fare 2 coglioni così a un presidente della Repubblica, dico, non è la cosa esatta, facciamo un'altra cosa. E lui mi fa, caro Giulietto, dice, bisogna che quando vengono questi personaggi, bisogna trattarli come vanno trattati. Dico, come? Dice, cosa c'è di bello, mi fa, dare 2 coglioni a un coglione, mi fa. E contento, che manco se ne è accorto, chissà che credeva che aveva mangiato quello lì.
No one ever said that he wasn't wicked. It was a great wickedness. That was part of his great charm.
When the Kennedys arrived in 1961, Washington exploded with glamour and culture, and they had a series of these fantastic black tie dinner dances. The first of which was in 1961, and the guests of honor were Johnny and Marella Agnelli.
Agnelli wanted to promote American-European relations in something like an Atlantic community.
Gianni always saw his role as trying to keep Italy in the West, to be part of NATO, to pull Italy in a modernizing direction.
I came to Europe to reassert as clearly and persuasively as I could that the American commitment to the freedom of Europe is reliable.
In 1962, Jackie and Jackie's daughter Caroline went to Italy. It was during that time that the rumors began. There were photographs of Johnny and Jackie sitting together or lounging on the yacht together.
Johnny had a boat. They took her to Capri. There was this singer there. I think she had great fun.
The New York Daily News said something like, First Lady in Pirates' Den. JFK did send her a telegram saying, more Caroline, less Agnelli.
The legend was that Jackie was another one of his affairs. Do you think that's nonsense?
I don't know. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised, ecco. Should I say that? I shouldn't say it, maybe.
How were Marella and Gianni with the children when they were young?
Not present. Also, anch'io. Non ero così presente. Il nostro centro era uscire, divertirsi. Stavano quindi sempre con signorine, governanti.
Erano bambini molto distaccati dai genitori. Non erano come una famiglia normale.
I met Margherita just one time in my life. I was with her father, and at a certain moment, the door opened and appeared Margherita, completely shaved. Agnelli looked at her and said, "What did you do?" And she said, "At least you noticed me." And she went.
Those years were culpable for many, many things.
Data l'età ormai avevo raggiunta e data la necessità di preparare mediamente una soluzione che sia una soluzione che affidi per l'avvenire della FIAT, l'avvocato Agnelli sia nominato presidente del Consiglio di amministrazione.
Che non si può pensare all'avvenire e al successo della FIAT senza pensare al successo della nazione in cui si trova.
When I got to be on the board of Fiat, I realized he was humble, very much in the line of duty.
Gianni was a very international man. So when he took over, he introduced American thinking into Fiat. And that was a good thing, because by then, Fiat really needed to become a bit more of a modern company.
Gianni did have a huge responsibility in Italy. What he had to devote his life to was to making
Fiat strong, that would strengthen the entire economy of Italy, which it did.
L'Italie, pays sous-développé il y a 10 ans, est aujourd'hui l'un des adversaires les plus dangereux dans le marché commun. Tel est le sens du miracle à l'italienne.
Fiat became the most important European car maker. It overtook Volkswagen of Germany, which was always the big rival.
Fiat, quatrième producteur mondial en 1967 après les trois grands américains General Motors, Ford et Chrysler.
L'automobile è diventato il simbolo della libertà dell'uomo nel movimento. Il sogno dell'uomo sarebbe stato di poter essere come Icaro, cioè di poter volare indipendentemente.
By 1969, Ferrari, an Italian treasure, was in serious trouble.
Ferrari loved racing. For him, selling cars was to fund the racing activity. And he run into difficulties. And that's when he asked my grandfather to help him.
Ferrari was up for sale, and Ford was very interested. For Gianni, it was unthinkable for Ferrari to be not in Italian hands.
The entire motor industry is concerned with the American safety standards. Agnelli, according to his plant manager, had to be restrained from sitting in the cars during the tests.
No, not too bad.
Fiat and Agnelli represent the new European challenge to America. Quick to engage new technologies, but sensitive to the human problems of the new industrial state.
Our size is over 1 million cars. I will sell over 1,150,000 this year. I don't know if that's a safe size, but it's already a big enough size to be competitors with the United States.
Gianni was stepping into the end of the golden period of Fiat, which was basically from 1945 until about 1967 and 1968. Then the unrest started in Italy.
The student protests in France spread to Italy, where they soon spread to the workers.
All over Europe, we had a sense of change, of revolution.
Cresce la ribellione nella più grande fabbrica d'Italia. Il lavoro è estenuante, il salario non basta.
Agnelli un padrone grosso, ma diventa piccolo quando gli operai si uniscono e riescono a combattere insieme.
The company is under heavy pressure from communist-dominated unions, in spite of the fact that Fiat is recognized as having one of the most enlightened industrial relations policies in Europe.
Gianni's impulse, when confronted with strikes or other tense moment in labor relations, was to try and talk to them.
Gianni tentò un appeasement col sindacato, un appeasement con la sinistra.
When you were at Agnelli's home, the communists and trade union people and left-wing writers and right-wing writers, they were all there.
Guardi, è una persona, innanzitutto fa piacere parlare con delle persone così, colte, intelligenti, brillante, spiritoso, e non metteva l'interlocutore a suo agio, non c'era questo io sono Agnelli, io sono qui, proprio così. Ecco, per questo mi è sempre stato tutto sommato, non dico simpatico, ma comunque una persona civile. Ecco, io amo le persone civili.
He had great sympathy for workers and also for their plight.
Direi che parte della loro inquietudine è dovuta al tipo di lavoro che l'industria dell'automobile fa fare, che è un lavoro ripetitivo, che è un lavoro psichicamente e fisicamente notevolmente disturbante.
He signed an agreement with inflation skyrocketing, indexing wages to inflation. It bought labor peace. The left-wing party supported it.
Many of his critics say it really hurt Italian business and industry.
He justified always, even with me, saying, at that moment in time, with the tension characterizing the country, with the social tension, political uncertainty, it was needed to have such an agreement.
There were a lot of people against Fiat in Turin, but not against Gianni Agnelli. There was something like a space.
Mr. Agnelli was the owner of Juventus, the most popular Italian soccer club.
In Turin, Juventus, the city's football team, is one of Italy's leading teams. And one of the responsibilities of being an Agnelli is to see to it that Juventus wins.
This van is the most expensive. The van costs $1 million. I don't know if he's worth it, but that's what it costs the team.
No, but it must be a terrible responsibility for him.
It should be more than it is. I don't think he cares.
Is this important to you, though?
I love it. And it means a lot to the town, and it means a lot to Italy.
His workmen, they were communists. So during the week, they were fighting with him. But at the weekend, they were on his side. And wherever he went, there was somebody who was going, "Oh, Avvocato! Come on, Juventus! Juventus!" They used to pass by and they go, "Juventus!"
Fiat, in that period, they have been facing the Kippur crisis. The cost of gasoline was going up very quickly. They were not selling cars.
By 1975, the car market in Italy declined 40%. Fiat was bleeding.
Really, there was no money left.
Per favore, quali sono le prospettive in relazione ai risultati economici dell'anno?
Mi dispiace, ho già detto prima al signore che si occupava della borsa che in questa sede non voglio parlare di conto economico o di bilancio. Le chiedo scusa, ma veramente non è la sede propria, non è che non voglia rispondere. Non è nemmeno il momento dell'anno proprio per farlo.
I told him, look, Mr. Agnelli, if you look at the P&L of Fiat, you immediately understand that there are too many people for what we are able to produce. We need to lay off at least 60,000 people.
There was an excess of workforce. And Agnelli said, I don't question it, but I'm not here to solve our problems to the detriment of the Italian situation. Because if I lay off all these people, who's going to offer them a job?
As a result of the oil price hike, the Libyan Arab Foreign Company was very, very rich and full of petrodollars.
Fiat needed an infusion of capital, and the Libyans were interested. Gaddafi, at the time, was not seen as a particularly nasty dictator. He was seen as one of these eccentric Northern African rulers, just a bit crazy.
So here comes this deal of selling 10%, so a minority stake of Fiat, for a huge price.
Eravamo sulla barca, siamo andati proprio giù in Libia. Ci ha ricevuto Gheddafi e c'era un grande tentone, lui aveva una tenta, proprio siamo andati proprio e doveva fare quell'accordo.
Did you think it was a good idea?
No.
No. Did you tell him?
Yes.
Gianni went ahead and did it anyway.
L'accordo Fiat-Libia è ancora la notizia del giorno. Le ripercussioni hanno interessato sia il mondo politico, sia quello economico che quello sindacale.
It was an equity infusion of $400 million, which at that time was an unbelievable sum. It was a fantastic deal for Fiat.
The Libyans had board seats, but they couldn't influence the way Fiat was run. It worked astonishingly smoothly.
Mi pare che è evidente quanto più noi ci possiamo valere di risorse finanziarie dall'estero, anziché pesare sulle risorse di credito che sono difficili, problematiche e costose in questo paese oggi, tanto più rendiamo un servizio all'economia del paese.
When the Libyans came, he called me up and told me, look, resign from the board. It's not to the liking of my new partners, or not partners, but stockholders, to have somebody with a Jewish name on the board. So please, goodbye. It's one aspect of Mr. Agnelli. It's his toughness. He was a totally unsentimental gentleman. I love him, and I always did. But he was like that.
Fiat was a sort of raison d'etat. It would come before everything.
Gianni felt that he was running, more than a corporation, he was running an economy.
He was the king of Italy. I thought there was no doubt about it. In the years I was there, he controlled everything. Controlled everything. One moment. Mr. Kucha controlled everything.
If there was a political system that was structured to keep Italy from toppling over, there was also an economic structure with the same purpose, and that was centered on Mediobanca.
Mediobanca was run by an extraordinary individual who was Mr. Kucha.
Mediobanca organizza un prestito che è garantito da ipoteche sugli stabilimenti e sulle proprietà immobiliari di Fiat Auto in tutta Italia.
If you say the spider at the center of the web, that sounds perhaps over-sinister, but he was.
He was fundamentally a Sicilian. He would make things happen. Not all the time you would know how.
Kucha called Agnelli and said, I want you to hire a new chief financial officer because I don't understand your account and you don't either. That is the reason why Romiti joined Fiat.
Romiti had the nickname Il Duro, the tough one. Romiti was a Roman, and he was completely at home in playing the power game with Roman politicians. And Gianni was actually not very comfortable in doing that. He's too Torinese, he's too Northern Italian. He found it quite ugly. It didn't fit into his idea of how things should be done. He let Romiti do the dirty work. That also made Romiti later on so powerful because Romiti knew all the secrets.
Who was Romiti loyal to, Gianni or Kucha?
There is no doubt in my mind that Romiti worked for Fiat, but on behalf of Kucha.
Italians were at the ballot box again. The communists won over 33% of the votes. It was a major communist victory, and it was celebrated as such.
The communists take over even the city of Torino. and the region of Piemonte. That was a shock for the country.
Italy now has the biggest communist party in the West, something like 2 million members. It controls unions and through them controls the industries and offices where the union members work. Bologna, Milan, Turin, Florence, Naples, Venice, Genoa, Pisa, and even the government of Rome is communist.
It was the dead center of the Cold War. The United States, with its NATO allies, versus the Soviet Union.
The United States does have apprehension on a broader basis for communist participation in the Italian government.
Dobbiamo porci un problema. Che cosa è il Partito Comunista Italiano? Che cosa sono i partiti comunisti? Qual è la loro dipendenza da Mosca? Qual è la loro tentativo di indipendenza da Mosca?
Italy was the weak link in NATO. It was the weak link in the European Union. It was the place in which it was most likely that a West European country might somehow topple over into the Soviet camp.
Di partito comunista guida ed egemone ce n'è uno, che è quello sovietico. Egemone perché? Perché al potere di una grossa potenza da 50 anni, ha vinto una guerra, ha pagato nel sangue, tutte queste ragioni qua. Ci sono dei partiti comunisti derivati, alcuni scissionisti, cinese, albanese, jugoslavo, poi c'è questo che chiamiamo eurocomunismo in Europa. Eurocomunismo è un termine improprio, perché ogni partito comunista ha una natura diversa e dei problemi diversi in Europa. Abbiamo il partito comunista portoghese, che con poco più del 10% dei voti, appena ha visto la possibilità, ha tirato di fare il colpo e prendere il potere in modo assoluto. Abbiamo il Partito Comunista Italiano, che sta oggi tentando di acquisire la credibilità di una certa possibilità di autonomia da Mosca. Sono sicuro della loro volontà di autonomia da Mosca. Quello che non sono sicuro è della possibilità di un Partito Comunista al giorno che fosse al governo dell'autonomia da Mosca. Fino adesso abbiamo avuto un'altra esperienza. Abbiamo detto quella cubana, quella derivata del tropical comunismo. Che destinazione hanno avuto questi cubani? Hanno finito per fare le guerre coloniali per l'imperialismo sovietico. Io non vorrei che un giorno il destino di questi eurocomunisti potesse essere analogo. Questo è l'unico. Siamo andati fuori tesi per questo.
Pirani, hai un...
Il presidio ai cancelli e ora corteo.
Grandi fabbriche, c'era una contestazione continua, continui scioperi, continue attività per turbare la produzione.
Da quando è stato incendiato, uno dei reparti selleria della Fiat Mirafiori è rimasto così, ancora sotto sequestro da parte del giudice.
Le fabbriche erano veramente gradualmente divenute ingovernabili.
The Agnellis were seen as the villains, the capitalists. There were these famous slogans in the streets, Agnelli, Pirelli, ladri gemelli, which means Agnelli, Pirelli, twin robbers. Maintaining order in a situation which was pre-revolutionary was very difficult. There was drug dealing, prostitution.
There were incidents of Fiat managers kneecapped. There was really terrorism and violence.
Questo fu il background da cui vennero fuori le Brigate Rosse e il terrorismo.
The Red Brigades were ideologically motivated.
The Red Brigades wanted to install some kind of leftist alternative. I mean, there were anarchic ideas, there were quasi-communist ideas. The fundamental drive was armed revolution.
Between 77 and 79, the Italian terrorists had really ramped up their activities.
Terrorist organizations were shooting people, preparing attacks.
The Red Brigades were taunting Italy.
the Red Brigades have demonstrated ruthless skills in maiming or killing establishment figures, such as this magistrate shot dead in Rome on February the 14th this year. On Tuesday, a guard from the Turin jail was shot dead by 3 gunmen. Firebombing of industrial executives' cars escalated to kneecapping of politicians and journalists, then kidnapping and murder. So far this year, there have been over 1,000 acts of political violence.
Every morning was the war bulletin. You tune the radio in and see who had gotten shot that very day. And every day, something would occur. A manager, a judge. Fiat executives were prime targets.
L'obiettivo ultimo era la distruzione dello Stato e in questo Stato la Fiat aveva un ruolo immaginario assolutamente prevalente.
My father, he was going to go to the office. He left my mother in the garage downstairs the house and took his car, and these people were waiting for him. They have been following my father for weeks. 2 of them came behind him and shoot him.
Brigate Rosse, l'assassinio di Carlo Guglielmo, perché, essendo Carlo Guglielmo il direttore della logistica, hanno ritenuto che questo ruolo, che era un ruolo, come dire, del tutto asettico e tecnico, fosse un ruolo politico determinante. Una persona dolcissimo e mite, ammazzato per strada con un carro. Torino era diventata una città poco vivibile. Sono stati definiti anni di piombo. Piombo non solo perché sparavano, ma perché l'atmosfera era molto pesante, molto pesante.
Daniel was very distressed about the situation and also about kidnapping.
Sono le 10 meno 10. Siamo appena arrivati sul luogo dove è avvenuto l'assalto. Ecco la macchina con i corpi degli agenti che facevano parte della scorta e l'onorevole Moro è stato rapito.
Moro voleva compiere la democrazia italiana portando il Partito Comunista al potere attraverso questa fase intermedia.
Pronto? E chi parla? Brigata Rossa. Va bene? Ha capito? Sì. Ecco, non posso stare molto al telefono. Lei deve comunicare alla famiglia che troveranno il corpo dell'onorevole Aldo Moro in via Caetani. Via Caetani. Va bene? Sì. Lì c'è una Renault 4 rossa. I primi numeri di targa sono N5. Per cortesia, no.
After 53 days in captivity, the Red Brigades assassinated Aldo Moro, Prime Minister of Italy.
Agnelli was pessimistic on Italy. He considered that the country was lost.
The Brigati Rossi wanted to kill him, of that is no doubt. They closed down Villa Perosa because there's 360 acres. There was absolutely no way you could close the place off. Somebody wanted to do something, put a bomb or something into the house, they could do it.
Many fellow industrialists left Italy. Gianni never even thought about that.
He stayed in his town, went to the factory every day, went to his office.
He was convinced that it would signal to other people in the world that he believed in Italy, and therefore they would believe in Italy.
He would drive his own car, losing the escort, the police car that were preceding and following him.
He had this Fiat car because it was important that he, as the head of Fiat, had a Fiat car, but the motor was obviously a Ferrari.
He was extremely clever in changing his own itinerary every way to go to Fiat. He made sure that Turin people knew he was there. It happened several times. He said, let's go and walk through Via Roma, that is the central Turin Fifth Avenue, with no escort, and with a crowd around that was telling him, thank you for being here. It was normal. That is dangerous? Fine. Who said that life should not be dangerous?
À côté du cadavre de M. Moreau, il y a le cadavre de la Première République italienne. Nous sommes dans une situation d'émergence économique et d'émergence politique.
Presque obligé de parler en termes de guerre.
Oui, c'est une guerre, oui, c'est une guerre.
A number of people, 61 in particular, were fired from Fiat Auto. Many of them were suspected of being terrorists.
Predictably, the firings caused strikes.
There was a negotiation of a contract of the auto workers, and there was a long strike of not of 1 day, 2 days, many days.
Most of the Communist Party in Italy, they respect the idea of a Fiat as a private industry. But there were a radical area. They had the idea to change the country completely.
Quel momento lì erano fuori i sindacati ormai, vedevano già il palazzo d'inverno, non lo so.
The head of the Communist Party, Berlinguer, did a speech at the gates of the Mirafiori complex.
He said, should it be necessary, we could occupy Fiat plants.
Ed è per questo, compagni, già da ieri noi abbiamo deciso il presidio dei cancelli di tutti gli stabilimenti della Fiat.
Cioè davanti alle fabbriche c'erano delle barricate che impedivano a quelli che volevano lavorare di entrare.
Avvocato, Torino era un mito, il mito dell'industrializzazione, il mito dell'auto, il mito del progresso, una specie di esempio per il futuro dell'Italia. Ecco, adesso questo mito sembra crollato.
L'atmosfera in Torino era veramente cupa.
«35 giorni senza portare a casa una lira». Pesava la cosa.
I negozianti che si preoccupavano, le mogli che cominciavano a incavolarsi.
E la borghesia è minore di numero, non si mobilita nello stesso modo in cui si mobilitano le classi operaie e soprattutto il suo posto di presenza non è la piazza, sono altri i posti di presenza. Abbiamo avuto da parte della borghesia lettere, articoli, presenze sui giornali e secondo me la reazione della borghesia è stata forse un po' troppo retorica, un po' troppo sentimentale. Meglio sarebbe stato se fosse stata una reazione più razionale.
Cosa andate a chiudervi come i topi nella gabbia?
Suddenly, the middle ranks of the Fiat workers organized a march.
Mi telefona l'avvocato e mi dice: Agnelli, quanti saranno? E io ho detto: tanti, guardi. Ma quanti? Io ho detto: tantissimi, tutti quelli che hanno a cuore la Fiat.
$40,000 people march through the city of Torino, demanding that they be given the right to go back to work.
Uno di questi cartelli diceva: Novelli, Novelli, fai aprire i cancelli.
It was an absolutely stunning development because nothing of the sort had ever happened in Italy. And it completely stunned the organizers of that strike, and they immediately gave up. They said, okay, we were defeated, we give up, tell us what you want.
Let's make an agreement here and close this very bloody chapter of Italian history.
Sarei certamente improprio a dire se non vi dicessi che il mare attorno a noi è ancora in tempesta, ma questo non ci impedisce di tracciare le nostre rotte. Sappiamo dove siamo e sappiamo dove vogliamo andare. I momenti più duri sono passati.
In 1981, things really turned around for Fiat and for the Italian economy.
The 80s are completely different.
In Italy, there's an obvious and growing prosperity, and much of it is due to Fiat's success.
Italy's become the talk of Europe, its emergence as a new economic power. To what do you attribute this strength?
Industrial relations have settled with better relationship between workmen and industry.
Mr. Agnelli, what is the best automobile in the entire world?
Well, I think the best buy is a Fiat.
Fiat at that time had the resources to buy back Gaddafi. So this huge operation was engineered.
It was very expensive to get rid of the Gaddafi people, but he did.
But when Italy gets better in the 80s, l'avvocato is seen as a unifying figure. There were money for the unions, there were money for the workers. Fiat was doing very, very well.
Gianni was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He was tired and he would have liked to take a step back.
Gianni Agnelli aveva detto ai giornali: io ho un successore, il mio successore è mio fratello Umberto, l'anno prossimo toccherà a lui.
E chi dopo di lei? C'è mio fratello, senza dubbio.
In realtà tutto ciò non avvenne perché ci fu il colpo di Stato di Romiti insieme con Mediobanca.
By the early 90s, Fiat was leaking cash. Enrico Cuccia used this as a lever to impose Romiti. Cuccia said Gianni had to stay on himself as chairman and to keep Romiti as chief executive. Otherwise, we won't provide the cash to save the company. Gianni had to let down his brother. Romiti had won.
Prima l'elicottero, poi è arrivato lui. E Marella mi ha detto una sola frase. Guarda, Gianni, oggi bisogna stargli vicino.
Gianni, who never swam in the pool, suddenly jumped in the pool, as if to cleanse himself of something he didn't want to do.
Tutti stupiti. Poi leggendo il giorno dopo, 2 giorni dopo i giornali, ho capito che cosa doveva essere capitato.
Si trovò a recitare quasi un pezzo di tragedia shakespeariana nella famiglia e nell'azienda. Toccò a lui in qualche modo decapitare suo fratello, rimanendo lui al posto che era già stato assegnato dalla dinastia familiare a suo fratello. Ma l'avvocato ha temuto a un certo punto di perdere il controllo della Fiat, non tanto per sé, quanto per quell'aspetto dinastico che era uno dei elementi fondamentali della sua leadership.
Five years later, Cuccia had less influence, and Gianni was able to finally get Romiti to retire. He was then looking for a new chairman. From early childhood, Edoardo Agnelli could assume to be the next boss of Fiat.
Edoardo was a very intelligent, very sensitive boy. I mean, he was really of good quality. But he had all the qualities which Gianni couldn't appreciate because he was sentimental. He was an intellectual and totally different from his father.
They say that intelligent boys aren't very courageous. Because you're stupid when you're too courageous. But that was something my brother didn't like. He did like that Edoardo wouldn't jump down into the sea and go into the waves.
Gianni would tell Edoardo, today we're going to go to the soccer game, I'm going to pick you up at 3, and then he would never show up because he'd completely forgotten.
Cosa succede al cervello? Quando era piccolo dicevo diventerò il proprietario della Fiat. Quindi in uno già timido, già complessato, già che si sentiva, poi Gianni era sempre molto quick, pochissima pazienza, e proprio veloce di natura, capito? Si sorpassava tutto. Quindi un ragazzino così che viene lasciato da solo, ripeto, era un ragazzo un po' perso.
He came here to Princeton and then things went south.
Edoardo got heavily into drugs, into heroin, and Gianni probably felt somehow responsible, as well he should.
There was a succession problem.
Edoardo was not suitable for any role in the company. On the other hand, Umberto's son, Giovanni Alberto, showed a lot of promise, and Gianni thought, well, he is the likely heir. Gianni told his brother, here is the next head of Fiat, and it's your son. And so, although Umberto was never going to get the role he had been waiting for all his life, at that stage, at least his son was going to take over.
Giovannino was a very clever boy, very hardworking. So we all put a lot of hopes in him.
He was the one, and, you know, everyone knew that, and then he wasn't there anymore in a very, very fast way.
He was 32 when they discovered this cancer. They discovered it like in the spring, and he was dead by the end of that year. He was this beautiful, beautiful boy, so full of life. He had just gotten married. He was waiting for a baby.
He was always smiling, was always laughing. He had everything. Umberto was absolutely struck dead. He never got out of the story about Giovannino.
Life has to go on. So Agnelli told me I have to fill that position in the board.
The only person in the dynasty line was John.
He found one of his grandsons that he really likes.
He said, my grandfather put me into the board of Fiat when I was 21, so I don't see why I shouldn't do the same.
He asked me if I would go with him in his room, and so I went with him in his room, and he basically said, I'm thinking of appointing you to the board, and that was basically it.
I think he was an amazing grandfather. I wouldn't have wanted to be his kid.
We had lunch, and I remember at some point Eduardo said something, and Gianni really lashed out at him. And so I thought, you know, I can't believe that after all these years the relationship is still so strained, with a lack of respect on the part of his father. That was 3 days before Eduardo took his life.
He jumped from 100 meters.
Allora io ho fatto dico avvocato, dico lei un po' di colpa ce l'ha pure lei. Edoardo per me era un grande ragazzo, bravissimo, bravo proprio. Il padre ci aveva avuto poca fiducia in lui e lui vedendosi così ha fatto quello che ha fatto.
The call came, and when Marella came back to the table, she was visibly distraught, and she said that she wanted to go for a walk. She said now she knows why her father had told her the story about Francis of Assisi and Claire. Claire's friend had thrown himself off the bridge, and St. Francis wrote Claire saying, Claire, Claire, do not despair. Between the bridge and the water, I was there.
My grandfather sadly had to go alone to recognize his son. And he had my uncle restaged and re-put in an acceptable way for my grandmother to see him.
Gianni was completely devastated, and he said to me, God, you must have a lot of guts to throw yourself down from that sort of bridge. Eduardo did it to show his father he had guts.
When Eduardo died, we went for the funeral to the house in Villar Perosa. Gianni, at the end, said, we should never forget that this was a happy house, but this is not a happy house now.
I wrote him a letter, and I told him to go to that. That if he went to the Museum of Natural History and looked at the cosmos, he might think that there is an ultimate fitness that we can't understand, or maybe not. And he never answered that letter until a year later, and said he had done it, and it had had some meaning for him.
He got hit much more than my grandmother. That made his body weaken. Everything went downhill.
I saw Gianni 1 month before he died. It was very sad. Very, very sad. You didn't recognize him. I don't know if he recognized me. I don't know.
He fell into a state of what I thought was depression. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen, because you suddenly see a titan, somebody who was larger than life, somebody that you really thought would never die, completely defeated.
His funeral created the largest crowd that the city of Turin has ever seen.
Han portato la bara sul tetto del Lingotto e 500.000 torinesi sono saliti sulla famosa pista dove c'era la bara di Gianni Agnelli, come i musulmani vanno alla Mecca.
Workers, people of his own city, queued in a cold winter day.
I mean, we stood up there, all the family. My hands hurt so much I had to give my left hand because I couldn't give my right hand anymore. And so many people said, I got something from your brother, I got something. I had a friendship. He gave work to my son, he gave work to my brother, you know. And they said, when things in Turin were going badly, we heard the helicopter pass through there. We knew he was arriving in town and we were happy about it.
He would never admit it, but he knew he was the Prince of Italy. He was the international image of Italy, the most glamorous man in Italy.
He was the epitome of what an Italian should be. Very polite, popular with ladies, flamboyant enough, not too much, stable in a period of instability. He was really a prince.
Christmas cards were always done by my grandmother. My grandfather was alive Christmas 2002, 2003. He decided to work on his own Christmas card. So he carefully picked 3 pictures of Stealth, which is this sailing boat he was very proud to have built, of Ferrari, who in 2002 won the World Championship, and finally Juventus won the Italian Championship, the Scudetto, in 2002. He really wanted to give a sign of vitality, and it was a way of lifting the spirit.